My name is Jerem McDonald. You can see my name there. It's listed as the moderator. I think that's probably a little too pretentious. You can just call me the one who drew the short straw. I'm the director of the Office of Digital Humanities at Brigham Young University, and we're excited to be here on this panel. I'm going to let my fellow panelists introduce themselves in just a minute. We're kind of shuffling things around. We're going to be moving around a lot. We'll probably make it a little too difficult for the cameraman, so we apologize in advance as you're following us as need be. But we wanted to make it interactive because, of course, our subject is interactivity in terms of video, and specifically video annotation, using video annotation in the classroom for the types of needs that both K through 12 as well as higher education may find useful for their pedagogical purposes, their research purposes, whatever they might be doing with their video. Before we start with some of the short demos that we wanted to talk about, there are just a couple of underlying principles that I want to mention that help kind of frame the discussion that we want to have today, both amongst ourselves as well as with the participation and the questions from you. The first one, as we were meeting earlier and we were talking about some of the things that we want to make sure we concentrate on, one of our panelists, Jeff here, he said, well, first of all, he said this is where the interesting stuff is, of course, but really the second thing he said was that when it comes to thinking of how you're delivering your video, you have to take a much different approach, and you have to have a different paradigm when your goal is to have your viewers retain the information, as opposed to in the entertainment world where you're trying to elicit various responses or whatever it might be. And I think that's an incredibly important underlying principle when it comes to the issue of annotation of videos. The second point that I want to make right now is that I don't think we want to claim that any of our conceptual ideas are unbelievably new, necessarily. People have been annotating video as long as video has been around. Back in the days of Laserdisc, the days of web DVD. I mean, you could even go back earlier to silent film, exactly, intertitles and so forth. Captioning, subtitles can all be considered annotation. And we'll talk about what we consider annotation and so forth. So we're not trying to wow you with the latest and greatest in terms of what an annotation can do with a video, or say that we're doing something that no one's ever done before. In fact, even earlier today, people have been talking about different systems they may have homebrewed together. A lot of products out there will have the ability to caption or annotate videos in various ways. I think what we're most interested in, especially as we're coming at it from the educational point of view, is in our attempts to get annotation into the classroom, we are really thinking hard, and we hope that everyone can think very hard about some of the frameworks surrounding why we would want to annotate video. What that does for the act of watching, what that does for the act of learning, what that does for the collaboration between a viewer and either a producer or a distributor or a teacher of video. So I've definitely said more than enough. We're going to start with Mark Kaiser, and I'm going to let him introduce himself. And while he's introducing himself, we're going to switch the video cable to our laptop where we've got a few more things set up here. So I'll go ahead and switch it if you want to just introduce yourself.
So I am the Associate Director at the Berkeley Language Center, and we're a unit at Berkeley that provides technological and pedagogical support to the various departments, to the 10 departments of foreign languages on campus. And I'd like to frame this application that I'm going to show you. Feature film has long been recognized by foreign language instructors as a tremendous source not only of language but also of culture, and in particular not just cultural artifacts but cultural values. What are the societal values that are at play at any particular time? And but bringing feature film into the classroom or into providing homework assignments based on feature film presents numerous problems. You're dealing with a 100-minute, 140-minute perhaps film that's going to take 3 or 4 class periods to show. The film will, you don't have an opportunity then to break down a scene and talk about the particular language used in a scene, because then you'd be stopping the video and starting the video, and it wouldn't take 3 class sessions, it would take 6 or 7 class sessions. So our purpose was to take feature films and create short clips from those films, tag those clips for not only the language spoken in the film, but also for discourse, linguistic, and cultural features within the clip, so that instructors could search the database, find a list of all the clips that maybe deal with, for example, a wedding. People talking about their upcoming wedding, scenes of a wedding, et cetera, and then in a unit where they're dealing with dating and marriage and so forth, instructors would have access to this long list of clips, and they could choose which clips they want to provide their students. But of course, pedagogically, just having students watch a clip isn't really sufficient. We want to have students reflect on that clip and so forth. And so we're using annotations as a way of asking questions or making comments about a clip for the students to answer and perhaps turn in as homework. Much of the video clip project is used not in the classroom but as homework assignments. And I should say that this video clip project that I'm going to show you just very briefly, we now have 13,000 video clips drawn from over 300 feature films, and it is being used at some 35 institutions across the country. So on your screen, this is the opening scene that you would come into. So you have a list of clips and some sample films. And if you were to do a search on something such as names, because you want to expose students to the different ways Russian names are used, so you do a search on names, and you get this list of clips that have been tagged for names. And this clip down at the bottom here has 6 annotations, and you can see a list of these annotations that have been created for this clip. And then instructors can take this clip, order it, put it in their cart, which I did earlier to just keep things short. And at this point, they can either create their own annotation for this clip by typing something in here, or they can look at existing annotations that other instructors have created, and if there's one of these annotations that they want to use, well, then they just add that annotation, and it will appear on the clip. And then at this point, they can come and preview their clip. And this is what the students would see when they watch a clip. And as you can see over on the right-hand column, we have this audio feature that we've taken the audio track of this video clip, stretched it by 50% so that students can be watching a clip, and if they have some language that they couldn't understand, they can click on the audio. It will back up a second. It will play the audio slowed down by this 50%, so it gives students a chance to decipher this stream of speech, break it up into individual words. We have a slow internet connection here, so it is taking a second to download. But anyway, you see here then the list of vocabulary items that are spoken in this clip at some point, and then information about the film here. It will start playing when it gets to 50% downloaded. So. Anyway, we don't have to actually play the clip, so. There it goes a little faster. No, it seems to have crapped out on this download.
Well, what happens if you play the audio clip? Is that going to queue up the video?
Yeah. No, it's going to download the audio first, and then.
Георгий Иванович,
Okay, here's the audio playing slow.
он же Гога, он же Гоша, он же Юрий, он же Гора.
So what you're saying, if I can just clarify, these audio annotations, they're kind of generated dynamically as students are going through the clips, or are they all preset based on the video clips?
They are all pre-created, but are downloaded only when summoned.
Okay.
So, yeah. Anyway. I think that's what I wanted to show.
Hi, everyone. Actually, I'm going to stay standing, I think. Stay warm, everybody. I'm Jeff McGee. I am a quasi-academic. My background is as a journalist. Here we go. I spent about a decade working at ABC News, the New York Times, and then a while in France at Le Monde. My background is in multimedia and information graphics for online news. I came to Stanford 3 years ago now, originally on a journalism fellowship where I was looking at ways to research and improve my skills in data visualization and interactive media. And I started working with a research center on campus, the Bill Lane Center for the American West, where I'm the creative director now. We're a center that was founded by historians, but we're interested both in pedagogy across all the disciplines that address the North American West, both past, present, and future, ranging from anthropology to history to political science to civil engineering and environmental science. But we're also interested in public engagement around issues related to the West. That is, finding both communities of interest, people who are interested in, say, water issues in the West, for example, policymakers, and also the general public in a region that has a lot of interesting and important issues coming up in the next 50 years, growing populations, straining resources, and the possibility of climate change. So as a sort of a journalist in residence, my job is to create media products that engage both students and faculty, but also the wider general public around issues that we're interested in, so that rather than doing projects that are about our research, we're doing projects that are sort of the product of our research, that is, of the research. And so one of these projects is called the Rural West Initiative. I've been working with both academic scholars and with other journalists like John McChesney, who was a reporter for National Public Radio for a number of years. And he and I did a report recently about the energy boom in western North Dakota and how it is utterly transforming not only the communities there, but the wider region. And it's having a huge impact on our national economy. The unemployment rate in North Dakota is down to about 2%, I think, right now. So what we did, John McChesney, of course, his background is as a radio journalist, but I believed pretty strongly that doing a long-form radio series on this was not going to work online. The podcasts certainly have been successful in the past, and there are arguments to be made, but we felt that this was something that we could engage a broader audience through video. But the issue here is that energy independence, energy exploration, energy prices, those are important national issues, strategic issues, economic issues, environmental issues. So we knew that this isn't just a story about western North Dakota, which some might view that as more of a niche audience, population-wise. But this is a tremendously important national issue. And so so we're doing journalism about this, but we're also doing it in an academic context where we want it to be fully informed by the subject matter experts and people that we have access to both in the Stanford community and outside of it. as part of this project, we commissioned a rigorous economic survey by a firm in Montana called Headwaters Economics. And so what we had this on-the-ground reporting. We had interviews, we had scenes, we had sources, but we also had this very rich and you might argue dense policy paper and economic analysis. And so how do we marry these things together, and how do we do a video presentation that can both engage people, let's say on the coasts, who are more interested in terms of like, is gas going to cost less? Are we going to be free from, foreign energy dependence? And also people in these communities, in communities that are less served by national media or by sort of long-form documentary work. People who are wondering, well, what is the character of my community going to look like? Western North Dakota is a very agricultural area, and this is a large-scale industrial operation that's rolling in and transforming the area. And the last thing is, if there's a lot of wealth created by extracting oil and gas from the ground, who's going to get rich off of it? So I'm going to show just the first minute or so of the documentary.
Is no stranger to having its landscape drilled, draglined, and mined for fossil fuels. But according to many experts, the best, or the worst, depending on your point of view, is yet to come. High energy prices have made advanced drilling technologies profitable, pushing drill bits into parts of the West once believed tapped out, and into new places once thought inaccessible. 3 communities in North Dakota and Wyoming find themselves at different stages of an energy boom. The frenzy of drilling.
When there's more jobs than people, that's the place to be.
Exactly.
To expect a county of 20,000 people to overnight absorb another 20,000 people is ludicrous.
The aftermath of a decade of production.
Where we're standing right now has the highest concentrations of hazardous air pollutants in the Upper Green River Valley.
Seems like there wasn't an aspect of our life that wasn't changed. Church life changed, schools changed radically, our traffic changed, how we were raising our children quickly had to change.
And anticipating the rush of future energy riches.
Everybody's just been obsessed with this oil play, the Niobrara shale play. So I thought, okay, we'll put up an oil derrick in our cornfield.
What happens to the people and the landscape as one of these booms rips through an area? And what's the cost of industrialization to their way of life?
So this film, An Unquiet Landscape, is about 30 minutes long, and it is going to be airing on some public television stations in the Midwest, which I think, to one extent, is a validation that we produce something that is broadcast worthy and sustains a narrative. But at the same time, I think one of the criticisms that we get as journalists from people who are subject matter experts is that we're only just glancing past the substance of an issue. And in those 30 minutes, video is a very high bandwidth medium in terms of, what kind of bit rate it requires. But in terms of the amount of information per second or per word that you can get across, it's quite a bit lower than print. And when you're dealing with a chewy public policy issue, it can be incredibly frustrating when you're writing a video script and you know that there's all these digressions you want to go into that, this is how books are written, right? You can take a long-form magazine story and blow it out to, 300 pages by doing those digressions, by meandering down interesting paths and coming back to the main theme. Well, what if you could do that in video? I'm not going to talk about nonlinear video where we're actually branching off and watching different video narratives, because at a certain point, I guess that becomes an incredible production challenge. But instead, I view this as almost like creating a guided tour of a subject of subject matter, whereby you're sort of touching on different top-level themes that some people might have sufficient previous information that they don't need to have the basic sort of exposition. They live there. They know a lot of this stuff. They know that Williston, North Dakota is booming, but that is also under strain, all their resources and civic infrastructure. But on the other hand, there might be people who don't know anything about Western North Dakota, and this is going to engage them and introduce them to these communities. So the idea is, think about when you're watching, let's say, public television, and a little bug comes on screen. It says, go to our website for this thing. And it's cued to an exact moment in the video where it's saying, we have more stuff from this interview. Which, I mean, granted, outtakes from interviews is not exactly going to get me out of my couch and go clicking online. But the context here on the line is that you're already online, you're there. And so the idea is, how do you subtly indicate that there's deeper information, there's a chance to branch off and go further in this particular area without interrupting the flow? And so the idea here is basically you have this sort of hopper underneath the video that is loading as the video elapses. So here's more information about the big oil play in western North Dakota. And so you've got these Google flyovers, you've got stats over time, then you're meeting the different characters in the video, you're meeting these towns, we're introducing you to where they are. Sort of supplementary information, you can link out to additional content. We tried to keep these relatively short. It's not like each one of these is an endless discursion, but rather sort of some reinforcement. And you'll see that the lower third display is also controlled through the video player. And so this whole thing is broken into 4 chapters. It's actually the same video clip that's just being queued to a different point. And what you have here is not only can you view the annotations in situ, but you can also hit this button, and it will reveal all of the annotations that have been applied. I'll have a little screenshot of that moment in the video. And then if there's a particular subject you're interested in, and you find it in here, you can then queue it up and play it from that point. Now, the other thing about this video player is that it's, well, I should explain the technology in a second. The idea here is just sort of like you can reach different audiences at different levels of specificity. But you can also basically, in terms of pedagogical uses, imagine having a sort of a précis of a course where you're introducing all sorts of new pieces of evidence and then providing links to readings or even annotated bibliographies, different things that help sort of get people up and running with the basic subject matter, but then gives them a sort of a framework from which they can start to explore. Now this works off of some stuff I've done in the past. Basically, this started out when I was in France. We needed to introduce Barack Obama and John McCain to a French audience during the presidential campaign. And so we had this idea that we would show pieces of, this is getting a little dated, but there used to be a YouTube player here that would bring up Obama's complete address to the 2004 convention. And so you could see like how he sort of had appeared on the scene in the U.S. Well, I don't know. There's like a family tree here. There's a thing of where he'd lived in his life, all that kind of stuff. So it's sort of like the basic building blocks of information that you need. And I did something similar with an hour-long documentary I did about data visualization that was designed to show how journalism is being changed by large access to information and things like that. And the idea is you're citing things that people might want to learn more about. Instead of them just flipping by and then never being seen again, you can track back and find out more information. Now, just about the player real fast. This is built entirely in HTML5. It uses a technology called popcorn.js, which is a JavaScript library being developed. It's open source. The project is being managed by the Mozilla Foundation. And the idea, their sort of big, hairy, audacious goal is to basically have video play better with the web. Instead of being sort of this alien plugin that does its thing and then there's an HTML page around it, you can actually, as the video elapses, have events happen all over the page. And so Popcorn has, as part of it, they're developing a sort of a nonlinear editor that lets you play back video and actually assign events to a particular, no, wait, that's not there, to a particular video display. And because our player leverages Popcorn, the idea is that in the future you'll be able to actually author your own versions of this in situ. You don't need to be a programmer to do this, but instead you have your video clip. You can drag back and forth and decide at what moment you want to bring up what supplementary information you can draw from Google Maps, from Twitter streams, just text blocks or other types of multimedia. And I think both this is something where instructors who are not likely to be as tech savvy or to have the time or the skill set to do programming are going to be able to take a narrative piece of media, whether it's audio, video, or even a slideshow or something, and turn it into something very rich and rewarding. So thanks.
Okay. Now, I'm going to move down here to the driving station myself, and I just want to demo what we have to show for 2 or 3 more minutes, if only to drive that one more nail home as to where it is that we all kind of are coming from and where it is that we all want to go. And then we're going to move more into the round table where we have some conceptual issues that we're going to be talking more about, going deeper into some of the things you've seen, and hopefully invite some of your feedback as well. Now, I mentioned earlier, I'm at Brigham Young University. The office there we have is called the Office of Digital Humanities. My academic background is in American literature. I have a PhD in English from the University of Maryland, and I'm approaching video, especially as it relates to education from that point of view. I shouldn't say I am, but I have historically. And so when I came to BYU and started to talk about some of the ways that I could get involved with some of the projects going on, one of my colleagues, he happens to be here, Harold Hendricks, and we've been trying to figure out how we can get him up on the stage in the least disruptive way. But I think he's comfortable down there as well. But he's going to help us out when we start talking more about some of the real meat and potatoes of our theory for how things are done. But he sat me down and talked to me about the history of annotated video at Brigham Young University and some of the things that have been going on there for 35 years. The early days of Laserdisc, where oftentimes you're able to do far more interesting things with annotations, with customized playback than we're able to now. The things that have been able to be done with DVD over the years, and the challenges that the streaming media world bring, but also the opportunities that they bring. And so this was 5 years ago. This is back before the days of Pop.JS, where HTML5 video was just finally starting to come on the scene. Firefox had just released Firefox 3.6. They finally supported it. Chrome was finally supporting it. And so as we started discussing about how we wanted to continue our efforts to make annotated video a useful educational tool at BYU, we knew that doing it in the browser was going to be the way to go. And so we started off building our own player as well, building it from scratch. When I first heard about some of the things that Jeff had been doing, I saw his player, we immediately turned to Popcorn.js ourselves, so our next version is going to be redone, refactored using that particular framework. But for now, the things I'm going to show you are more home-brew, the kind of things that you see a lot of educational institutions doing these days, where they're able to get a team together to build their own little mini player, whether it's HTML5-based, Flash-based, or so forth. And this particular use case, it grows out of a conversation that we had with one of our Spanish faculty members. We have a very large language instruction program, and one of the instructors who teaches Spanish came to us, and she said, for the past couple of years, in my Spanish 206 class, I believe it's a conversation class, if I'm not mistaken, she said, we've been using YouTube clips in our class. I found a lot of really great YouTube clips that can help our students learn the language. And in fact, the one that she was most excited about that she'd been using, someone had gone and uploaded every episode of the Colombian telenovela Yo Soy Betty La Fea, which was the original Ugly Betty. So the one that not only the American version, but all the other versions throughout the world were based on. And she said that not only was she having her students watch this in her class, but she had gone through and she had constructed these incredibly elaborate and rich academic exercises based on it, where she had vocabulary words that she wanted her students to learn that were pulled from the different episodes. And she had questions that she wanted them to ask them and have them respond to. And she had just been doing it on paper. She would give them a little printout or email them the file and say, watch the video, and then go do some of the exercises or read over the vocabulary. And if you want to remind yourselves of the places in the video where that word appeared, you can use the little YouTube scrubber bar and go back. And so as they were relating some of these things to me, I thought to myself, first of all, this is an incredible amount of, there were 7 seasons and 20, so 140 episodes, all on YouTube, broken, of course, up into 10-minute blocks, because back then YouTube didn't allow more than that. But the other thing that I thought is, well, why is it that she's handing out the students this paper? Because we've got this idea of annotated video that we want to be able to play. We're looking at how to do it in the streaming world. And YouTube, even at the time, had an incredibly rich API. In fact, it's gotten so much better over the years as well. And so we started to build our player with the idea of not just annotating our own content that we're hosting or serving ourselves, but annotating other video, wherever it may come from, whether it's coming from YouTube, whether it's coming from Vimeo, whether it's coming from someone else's streaming server that they have in their system. And so this particular demo does that, and we tried to, this really is just when I say this is a demo, this isn't the actual class material, although it is still being used in the class. This has become the text for their class, and in fact, it's not only used in our Spanish 206 class, but other institutions have started to use it as their textbook because we've got the educational material that goes along with it. This is just a sampling of it. So some of the things we're able to do is we're able to put in pop-up notes that appear and stop the play of the video, for example. We're able to have vocabulary words that appear, and as it appears, now I'm going to be hampered a little bit by the internet connection, I'm sure. And so if a student wanted to, they could just repeat that same clip over and over again to get the context of their vocabulary words. There's the idea of looking at more difficult passages, where if there's if something's hard to understand because it's slang or because it's maybe spoken fast, we allow them to mark. We allow our faculty members to mark that so it can be shown and played over and over again as in kind of the educational setting. Assuming it gets here. And I'll let this one play because in about 15 seconds.
Antipática, ven que te queremos conocer. Ven, no es con usted.
This, of course, this is what we always know about the world of streaming media, is that the internet is going to be our biggest bottleneck. The bandwidth is our biggest bottleneck. And so we've even got the capability of having interactive questions where the questions the teacher might want to ask appear there, and the students would type their response and submit it, and then that gets sent back to the instructor as part of their homework. Other ideas that we've come out, and we're still trying to figure out what it is that our instructors can do with a system like this, and what it is that tools like what Mark has shown you, what Jeff has shown you, that we're trying to build, what they can really do and stretch their limits. You know, whether it's, for example, annotating our video with other videos. Maybe a student is looking at this and saying, "Hi, I'm learning the word for stock market. What else is out there on YouTube?" And so they'd click there and do a YouTube search of other videos on YouTube that have to do with that have that same vocabulary content in place. And of course, we're always looking for. We're looking for ways that are ways that we can work together with other people at other institutions, and ideas that they might have for their content, for their classes that we can build. So hopefully these three demos. The reason why we wanted to start out with demos is to kind of lay out the state of how things are right now, or some of the possibilities. But we also want to talk a little bit more about some of what really went into it, some of the concepts. And so I'm going to now switch from the role of presenter to the role of moderator a little bit more and ask some questions of Mark and of Jeff. Harold, it would be great if you can contribute. Other people, if you have thoughts, you can contribute as well. And one of the things I think is worth talking about is the notion of a clip. You heard that Mark, he called what he has a video clip library. Is that what you call it? This idea of segmenting video into its sections, whether you do it literally by actually cutting it into, and I shouldn't say literally when it comes to computers, but whether you cut it, you actually are cutting it into files, or whether you're doing it in a more abstract sense, you're using some kind of standoff markup to delineate your different segments. How does this work, whether it's in the educational setting, in the journalism world, Mark or Jeff, where you came from before? What really are video clips? Why are they important? And what really has to go into the thinking about how we're going to segment our videos to make them useful as learning objects?
Well, I think there's different definitions of video clips. When you were annotating a linear video sequence, it seemed most helpful to us to actually have the whole narrative flow as one object that you can dip in and out of at different points, because networks are quite responsive now, and so are browsers. With the amount of RAM they have, you can buffer 30 minutes of video and still have pretty good performance. But I think one of the other things that I didn't touch on is that this was very much a polished, finished sequence of content. But I think that there's going to be an increasing number of experiences, I'll use that term, whereby you're not only going to be seeing the product of something that someone has sweated over and presented in front of you, but in a sort of a shrink-wrap way, but also the ability to work with media online in a sort of a collage-like way. That one of the variables in sort of the popcorn experience, where you can have all these different floating objects together, come together in time to be presented, those variables are also going to be other video clips. And I have a colleague who spent a good deal of time working on a project called 18 Days in Egypt, which was looking at the Egyptian revolution in Tahrir Square. And the idea was, instead of having a film crew go or licensing tons of footage from the various archival agencies, to basically take advantage of the huge amount of citizen-made media that is to be found on YouTube and Vimeo and a lot of the other sharing sites, take advantage of the metadata that includes time and place, and actually enable people to curate these clips and create their own sort of crowdsourced documentary. And the ability to sort of add in cues and out cues from various different pieces of footage, I think, is something that's getting more and more achievable. And it's possible even where you could have a class exercise where your whole student body goes out and shoots video of something, and then through a collective sort of media management environment, web-based, people could actually either, you could split up the work into different segments, and so everyone would work simultaneously from the same pool of media, or they could, take different interpretations of the same media. And you see that in commercials of people going to the same concert, and how there's technology that can now sync events, not just time code, but also like if it's at a concert, they can tell when there's, the music matches in certain spots. And so I think that, I think it's almost like the facets of a bug's eye or something like that. We have all these different sort of lenses that we're starting to stitch together, and I think that's very exciting.
I think in our project, from an aesthetic sense, the whole film is the video clip, and anything we do to that, breaking it up, is in effect destroying what the original artist had in mind when they created it. But taking excerpts from works of literature is something that, from text, is something that foreign language instructors do all the time to meet a particular pedagogical purpose. And so I think that within our project, some of the factors that come into play in determining what is a clip, one would be legal, because we have to keep it relatively short to fall within fair use guidelines. So all of our clips are less than 4 minutes in length. The nature of the scene or the shot and what is happening in that sense, that's going to determine how we cut within a 4-minute period. Pedagogically, what a student can handle. So a particular clip that is very dense in language, we're going to try and cut that shorter, because if the language goes on for 3-4 minutes, we'll find that students they stop listening, they stop comprehending what's going on, and their minds drift. So there are a lot of different factors in our project determining how we cut up this film and present it to the students.
Something that I've known, and I'm just kind of adding to it from my perspective, the Tim Berners-Lee was once asked, I think it was last year on the 20th anniversary, maybe it was 2 years ago, on the 20th anniversary of the release of his very first browser that ran on his desktop, with the server also running on the computer on his own desktop. He was asked what the key was to the web going forward, and he said that he thought that it was universality, and he felt that the lynch point to universality was making everything addressable via a URI, a uniform resource indicator. Of course, that's the underlying principle of the semantic web and linked data and going forth. But I think that applies to video as well, and there are a lot of people who are doing work on this, that making every single millisecond in a video addressable via a URL or a URI, so that you don't have to segment a video in order to make a video clip. You would just reference it based with their URI timecode system, and have your, as Jeff mentioned, have your in point and your out point, and it makes it much more personal. Someone can do a mashup a lot easier. You can have your entire object available, and then individuals can come along and just get the pieces they need by addressing them, as opposed to actually having to do some other kind of technological wizardry to get them to work. And I think YouTube has been doing that for quite a while. You don't even need to use their API. You can just go to any YouTube video and stack, attach a hash symbol and give your time codes in and out, and it'll play. It'll start playing there and playing at the end of the end out there. It leads into my next question then. We're throwing around this word annotation, and we've seen lots of examples of it. Mark, for example, you have the ability for students to add in comments that they might make. We have vocabulary words that we've seen here. We have metadata, background information, contextual information, audio as annotation, video as annotation. What really counts? If we're talking about annotating video, what really counts as an annotation? What's most useful, and what else might be down the road? What other ways might we be able to interact with our videos in terms of everything around it that we haven't yet seen come out yet?
Well, I would say that the annotations that we have created are not actually student-driven. They're all instructor-driven. So students are the end users of those annotations, but it's the instructors who are creating the text annotations. The different kind of annotation that we have are the comments that instructors make for other instructors on the clips. So we have annotations that are directed for students, annotations that are directed for instructors. All of this is shareable across institutions, so any annotations I make on a video clip, an instructor at Harvard can put on, can use for their students, etc. But I think that the way we did it, and we started this project in 2008, if I were doing it over again, or if I were to reconstruct this, we would get away from the pre-cut clips that we have now and reference everything and do it that way, and maybe cut on the fly.
Well, I think when we talk about annotations, I mean, to bring it back to the academic context, when you have extended quotations from sources, the citations, you need to extensively list where you're getting things from, and that kind of transparency and rigor that is applied to a textual creation by a scholar. I think it'll be interesting to see how we can do that in terms of the video space, because as people are creating multimedia, I think that maintaining that kind of transparency and accountability from creators, especially if they're literally citing works and sort of mashing them together in something. There's the technical aspect of where did you get this clip from and what is this source. But the other aspect is that an overlay of criticism on top of a piece of media. Basically, when somebody makes a contention, almost like sort of truth squatting things or fact checking, that you can do it in situ, and to do it in a social way in which students and instructors both can actually pin their comments to a time point in a video, and is, I think, extremely potentially valuable. And also to have an interface that enables people to access those comments without actually having to play back the video or simply scrub through the video interface, but actually scroll through an environment that might bring the video along for the ride, but you're actually sort of scanning it textually, I think, is something really valuable. When you look at sort of the debate watching templates that you're starting to see in news organizations, for example, where you've got the interactive transcript, where you can drive it through your interaction with the textual area by using search or by scrolling and clicking, and the video is sort of along for the ride, I think is very valuable. Because let's face it, I mean, timed media in a sense is like this tunnel. You know, you go in one end, you come out the other, and along the way, you know, viewing it from the outside, you don't really know what's in it. And in a sense, without taking the magic out of, you know, narrative presentation, which part of it is that you don't know what's going to happen and you're waiting for a moment, without completely, you know, taking the appeal out of that, the ability to sort of assess a piece of media, especially like, you know, public interest stuff like congressional hearings or, you know, testimony of different kinds, press conferences. Having that kind of ability to sort of fillet it, spread it open, and look at the contents is something really valuable. I think that one term when I'm trying to turn people off from the approach that I'm taking is I call them video footnotes, because that in a sense is what's going on. You know, we don't have time to go into this now, but this is something important, and this is some background information. But that's what they are. They're video footnotes in that sense. And I just want to go back to what, you know, the end of the previous question in terms of clips. I think that if we look at the way that map mashups have flowered as a format, as a medium, maybe even peaked, maybe it's a little overripe now, the idea of an annotated map with all sorts of, you know, links to various media, video clips, other maps, you know, data. I think we're just really at the dawn of a similar approach to media, be it sound or video. And the types of things that people are going to be able to author by using found media is going to be really exciting. I mean, you just look at things like, you know, the Gangnam Style Ghostbusters mashup that revealed that those are two songs that were separated at birth. But also just imagine that someone could do that kind of thing just by using found objects.
And earlier you dropped the word social, but I think that there's some real value in that word. You know, down on the less interesting floor of this conference, a lot of a lot of the presentations, they'll bring up the idea of second screen. So I can imagine in the educational world, eventually environments where you have, you know, second screen viewing as an academic activity. So that your students will not only get the annotations that the instructor might want to push to them on a second screen and consume the instructional design that way, but they'll be able to then push back, have their own tags, their own comments coming from the second screen in real time while they're watching a video maybe in a classroom setting. They'll be able to see kind of this shared experience educationally as they're flying along. And then the idea of mashups as well. You know, you see the types of things that Storify can do, bringing in different pieces of information or different pieces of commentary from different social media aspects. Imagine doing that not just with whole YouTube videos or whole Vimeo videos, but individual pieces of them, where you bring in a little clip from here, you add in your own annotation, bring in a clip from here. I think that makes an incredible educational activity, whether you're studying current events, whether you're studying history, whether you're studying literature, whether you're studying language and culture. I think the various environments in which something like that could flourish on the university is just really exciting.
One limitation we have is our legal counsel has been very generous with what we can do as far as what access we give to our instructors and what the instructors can do with the video clips, but has resisted any kind of direct access to the clip library on the part of students. And of course, this is all behind firewall, so it's not available to the general public.
We've actually faced that as well, and we're fighting all sorts of battles with our copyright specialists, and we haven't yet let the general counsel know what we're doing. And so,
well, you know, maybe part of it is that if there's a reward system in place in the future for copyright holders to get some kind of I don't want to say, you know, monetary compensation, but at least sort of some kind of credit that goes along with views. That, you know, when you look at a YouTube clip and you don't know if it's the original or if it's a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, and it's so hard to know who made something. You know, sometimes you're ripping stuff off without even knowing it. Like, how do you even find who originally made it? If we can straighten that out and actually have just sort of less loose copies and duplicates and pirated versions of things floating around, the more I think that these things could be in the commons in some way that still rewards the people who share them.
Yeah. My final question kind of sits on top of all of this discussion, the issue of user experience. You know, we showed you 3 different demos. Each of them is, you know, they were all built ourselves. We had different designers involved. We have different interfaces and so forth. When it comes to dealing with experiencing video and its annotations wherever you might want to place them, what sorts of things do you have to be aware of in constructing the user experience? What kind of pitfalls have you guys come across, things that make for a bad user experience? And what sorts of things might be important to emphasize? And I think earlier, as I mentioned, we were having a conversation, and Jeff, you had brought up the idea of the old pop-up video from the late 80s, early 90s on VH1, where those pop-ups were very, very intrusive to the watching the video, but people didn't care, and they were very excited about it. But you can imagine how in other situations, if you had that type of annotation, it may be very intrusive and may take away from what the video has to offer, whether in education or viewing for pleasure. So what sorts of things do we have to deal with when it comes to the user experience?
Yeah, mind if I take this, Mark? I think that's a really good, important consideration. I mean, pop-up videos, I think what made it fun was partly that these were songs that were maybe 5, 10 years old by the time we were learning about all the, silliness that went into how these videos were made and stuff like that, and who was whose sister, and who was holding tinfoil in the background or whatever. But I think that one of the things when you go to the Mozilla Popcorn demo site and you look at some of the showcase of projects that have been made with the technology, I think this is less the case than it was like a year ago. But in the early days, when you'd look at the demos, they would just basically give you a seizure. It was like you'd be watching this clip, and then there'd be a map on top of it, and then a bunch of tweets would come flying out, and you just want to run screaming from it. So the idea that we're going to improve video or save video by adding a whole bunch of bells and whistles to it is, of course, a dangerous one, if ideas can be dangerous. But at the same time, I think that there's an argument to be made that this is as much about judgment and subject matter and creativity as it is about technology. Doing this right, doing it judiciously to leverage the benefits of being able to create a second layer of information on a very now somewhat mature presentation medium is an interesting question. And I guess maybe we should differentiate between manipulations that affect the surrounding area of the video that are sort of annotations or
accoutrements, as I
enhancements,
call them, yeah.
And stuff that is actually central to the video display where you can't escape them or you can't actually continue watching until you've made a choice or interacted in some way.
And if I would just add that our experience has been, as far as providing options for instructors, is to keep things as flexible as possible. An earlier version of this software just presented all of the data that we had collected, the vocabulary list, the information about the film, a clip title, a description of what happens in the clip. And we had instructors come to us and say, well, I really don't want the student to see any of that information. I want to be able to ask questions and have them go on a treasure hunt of sort where they have to watch the clip very, very carefully and pick up information from the audio, the language that's spoken in the clip. So we revised our application and made all of these pieces of information that we do provide optional, and the instructor chooses what they want the students to be able to see. So I would encourage any kind of development in this area to be as flexible as possible.
And there may also be benefits from making it optional from the viewer's point of view, so that things can be turned off and on as needed. You can turn off the captions, hide the vocabulary list, whatever it might be. And not only so that students can watch it and not be interrupted in terms of pleasure, but there can also be academic benefits to doing that. So a student can watch it once, see if they understand, and then if they don't understand, they watch it again with the vocabulary words turned on to help them, kind of prompt them along the second time. So
yeah, there's just one thing I want to add to that. I think the design that we did for the documentary is meant to be fairly unobtrusive. We didn't put the annotations next to the video, we put them underneath. And depending on how big your screen is, it might actually go below the fold. Ideally, what I'd like to have it do is when there's a new annotation, to have it show up as a lower third and then actually plummet, like just basically fall out of the canvas. So you know that there's something going into that hopper. But you aren't going to engage with it until you reach the end. And then what's in the basket at the end is sort of almost like a scrapbook of your journey, and you can go back through and say, oh, yeah. And the last thing I want to say about the interface is that obviously Popcorn is an open source project. Anybody can use it. Popcorn Maker is supposed to come out this month. But one of the things that's going to make Popcorn Maker tick is the templates, the UI options that you have that are fixed when you choose one. They're fairly limited right now. Thank you. But the one that we built is actually built to the specifications for Popcorn Maker as it was developing at the time. And so what we want to do is put this back out into the commons and let people use it. And so we don't have documentation for it yet, but we're going to have that up pretty soon. And so I want to invite people to check out our site and look at the template and think about trying to use it themselves. So, and very interested in what other people are up to and thinking about in this space. We certainly don't have all the answers here. We're very curious about a conversation. Thanks.
We've got a few minutes left. Do you guys have any questions for us or things that maybe we didn't address that you'd love to see if we can stumble our way through? Yes, sir. And I'll go ahead and repeat the question after you.
I came in a little bit late, so maybe you already covered this, but you didn't have any classroom videos. I expected there to be professors speaking and how to chop that up, curriculum guides, etc. Can you speak to that, please?
I think that's a great question. Nothing that we've shown, and in fact, nothing that we're developing would prohibit that sort of use of these tools. We take the approach that we want to separate. We want to decouple ourselves from what it is you're actually showing, so that it will work for any video coming from anywhere at all. And so you could very easily take. In our system, you could very easily take a 10-minute lecture or a 30-minute lecture that a professor has shot of his or herself and then allow them to annotate their own kind of delivery of that with other things that would go into the classroom setting. And in fact, that's one of the approaches that a lot of these massive online courses are taken that you see from MIT or from Stanford or Coursera is a big one where they'll have the lectures recorded, but they'll give very easy to use so that professors can add in links, add in images, content, quizzes, and so forth to annotate their lectures that way. And I don't think it was by design that none of us had something like that. That. Just in our conversations, we were looking at video as an object of study in a classroom, but absolutely. I think there are a lot of ways where the delivery of the lecture itself could be used. You could take advantage of a similar system. So, other questions or comments, complaints? Yes, sir.
What about scalability? Obviously, this looks like it takes a tremendous effort to create each one of these assets. When it comes to reusability, there's also SME buy-in. I mean, how long does it really take to produce one 30-minute asset? Can you replicate that for 10 courses? Could you do it for 100 courses?
So the question for the video, it's about scalability and reusability of approaches like this.
Well, in the case of our project, we are making this available to other institutions, but to cover copyright issues, the other institutions have to own the DVD from which we cut the clips. And if they buy into that, then there's a way for them to indicate that they own XYZ DVDs, and then they get access, or their instructors at that institution all get access to those clips. There's no, we're providing this free of charge to other institutions as a service for foreign language instructors.
I think I hear what you're asking also in the context of like doing a high production video is a huge amount of work already, and then turning around and saying, no, we're not done yet. We're actually going to go back frame by frame and look for annotations and curate content on top of that. I don't think that it's something that one does, capriciously. But at the same time, I think that part of it has to do with tools. It has to get easier to curate this kind of stuff. I think I'm very interested in ways that we can start to mash up different sources of a pre-existing video, as opposed to a whole ingestion and content management pipeline. And but the other thing is also the WYSIWYG editing process. I think that with something like Maker, you can take a pre-made clip and actually annotate it in a way that's very enriching. And enrichment can be as little as what Mystery Science Theater 2000, 3000 provided as sort of a commentary. But I think also like the way a teacher could use this is to create a sort of a course reader in a sense that's video based and then has jumping off points to, many different aspects of the course, maybe even as a sort of a trailer for the course. Now, certainly, I don't want to sit here and say that, on top of the things that professors are doing already, that they now have to make a trailer for their course. But if you ask me, I would have been surprised that people are doing PowerPoint decks for every minute of every class, and here we are. So I think that as we do these things more, we start to build up new muscles, and I think also the tools have to be there to support that.
And there's some very interesting things going on in terms of automating approaches like this as well. I spoke with some people who are working out of Google Europe in Paris over the summer, who are very interested in automated semantic tagging of the content of videos. So, for example, they're looking at something like facial recognition, where it can scan through a YouTube video and it can do facial recognition techniques to find out who some of the people are in the video, and then they can tie that into their huge knowledge graph, so they can make annotations about those people appear in those time-coded points of view. And of course, it's very, very nascent, but there is interest in that type of approach to the problem as well. Let's come back here, and we might want to make this the last one because I think we're over time. Let's take this question, then afterwards we're going to stick around, and we'd love to talk to all of you as well.
Yeah, and I've got cards here for people who want to get in touch. Have any questions?
I think the popcorn platform is really appealing. That's really cool. I'm just wondering that video that you had embedded in there, does that have to be self-hosted, self-embedded HTML5 video that's going to interact with popcorn, or can you use a third-party technology?
You can use YouTube and Vimeo and probably N number of other providers. We chose a custom player just to avoid some of the latency issues, and because we didn't have any overwhelming need to use YouTube. But yeah, it's very much, most of the demos actually use YouTube.
It's a JavaScript framework that's plugin based, and so you can write a plugin for anything that's got an API. So if you've got your own your own WoWs and media server, and you're using Flow Player or JW Player, those products have APIs that you can talk to over JavaScript, so you could write a popcorn plugin that could do the same types of things. Because all you really need to be able to pause a video, play a video, display things around the video window, and a lot of the standards out there that are doing that in the streaming world already give you access to manipulate that.
Yeah, and sometimes because of your browser configuration, you might end up and then bad things happen. I say that as a guy who worked in Flash for a long time. I mean, it doesn't talk to the other stuff.
We very much appreciate being able to be here and your attention and your comments, and hopefully there's been something that's been useful. As I mentioned, we'll stick around and are happy to talk to any of you who want to. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.